right. Hello and welcome to the Project Catalyst Milestone Report. This is milestone number 1 for interoperability and cross-chain communication for Cardano, Vista, the verified interchain secure transfer architecture. And today I have Paul with me. Paul, hey, good to see you.
Howdy.
All right. So, Paul, we are going through Vista's design and architecture documentation. So, the goal of Vista, and this is in the milestone outputs, the goal of Vista is to create a bridged sidechain ecosystem and protocol for the Cardano network that can extend between Cardano-based chains and beyond. So as our first output and to help steer the rest of our developmental roadmap, we're going to publish the initial design and architecture documentation roadmap. And we're going to describe it right here on this video. So that's what our requirements are. They want the evidence of our milestone is progress reports by this progress report via YouTube, which is the video you're watching now. The Vista design and architecture YouTube video, which we will share, and the GitHub repositories, which will be a link here. So that is what we are providing. And so let's see. Go ahead, Paul. We're going to pull your screen up here. And here is the Vista protocol design documentation. So,
Yeah,
Paul, what are we looking at here?
Sure. Well, we've got our initial diagram here, which is just a general overview of the protocol. As you can see, it starts here on the left with a contract that's being observed. So the indexer here as a first initial module that you can consider inside of the Vista protocol layer, which would be a middleware layer between two chains. That indexer is going to be watching a contract on chain number 1. It's going to be watching for any transactions that happen there. So essentially any funds that are getting locked inside of that contract. When it notices that funds get locked, that indexer's job is to update a data structure and then send messages. Essentially, it's looking to send a message to the chain mirror, but it uses the relayer, and in a modular sense, those the relayer can be in and of itself a consensus layer that can work with any indexers and any chain mirrors. So that relayer is going to then pass that message on from the indexer to the chain mirror, and the chain mirror's job is essentially to make a you could consider it a miniature light client on the chain number 2 that is representative of the transactions that have occurred. So the UTXOs at the script address for that observed contract 1.
All right, perfect. So this is the highest, sort of the highest level. This is sort of the 10,000-foot view, if you will.
That's right.
Of the Cardano Vista protocol. The Vista protocol is not Cardano. It could be Cardano. It could be Cosmos. It could be Algorand. It could be whatever, right? It could be whatever other chain and Cardano, and especially, which is what we're working on now, Cardano to Cardano. So the Cardano mainnet to a sidechain launched based on Cardano's open source base code, right?
That's right. And when you're going from a chain that uses the exact same consensus mechanism, you've saved yourself quite a bit of work. So at first we're looking for, I'll say with this milestone, we're looking for a very generalized idea of what interoperability communication protocol looks like. And then, with our Vista protocol, we're looking first to connect the Cardano main chain with side chains that are Cardano based. And we're also looking at, further down the line, exploring existing fairly well developed protocols like IBC, and just figuring out a good set of protocols, you might say, that work well in different scenarios.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah. So let's continue on. Let's look at
Sure.
the documentation now for the indexer
So
here.
moving into a little bit more detail on the
Hmm.
indexer, that generalized diagram is really about as simple as we can get. And so if we're going to actually start to develop pieces of this, we need to take a little bit of a closer look at the details, and then we can kind of build our roadmap off of that. So looking at the indexer here, first, of course, it's looking at chain one. It's looking at specifically a script address on chain one. It's looking to detect specifically unobserved UTXOs that have been locked. And those UTXOs will uh, presumably have some assets associated with them, as well as uh, a receiver address on chain number two. So a wallet on chain number two that it's looking to transfer those funds to. When it sees those new UTXOs, it's going to kick off that operation to build that data structure. Now we've intentionally left this portion of it. Again, this is where a portion remains generalized because presumably there will be um, differing data structures that will work best depending on the consensus mechanisms that you're looking to tie together.
Excellent.
So when that data structure is built, you're ready to send that latest addition to the data structure as a message over to the relayer.
All right, perfect. So okay, and so this is the piece that this is sort of the, I guess, the gateway to the middleware, right? This is the part that pays attention to it. It pays attention to the main sort of the chain that you're coming from
Mhm.
and looking for this, and then sends information necessary further down the chain of events. That's correct.
That's right. Yeah, and it's an interesting, the indexer adds something to the mix that the blockchain alone doesn't do. So it's able to watch the chain as it unfolds for events of interest and then take actions based on that. So this is
Okay.
just kind of different behavior than the chain itself. And so they work that those two patterns work very well together.
Okay, perfect. And so I see the next thing we have in the documentation is the Cardano mirror. So tell me a little bit, what purpose does the mirror serve?
So the mirror sits on, you could say, the other side of the middleware layer from the indexer. That is, it's looking to write transactions to chain number two. And those transactions, in a nutshell, are representative of that data structure that's being built by the indexer. Okay. And so the reason that we do it that way is the uh, inherently in how that data structure is uh, organized, it will allow for the unlocking or minting of assets on chain number two. So rather than give the chain mirror keys to the kingdom to mint tokens on chain number two, we would rather have a mechanism that's agreed upon ahead of time that says when you notice that UTXOs are locked on chain number one, that's immediately going to allow chain number two to self mint, essentially.
All right.
So I
So,
can walk you through kind of a little bit more of how it does that. First it's
okay.
going to receive that message from the relayer, and it's essentially translating that message into a transaction based on how transactions are formulated in chain number two's consensus mechanism.
Okay. All right. So yeah, so it's literally sitting there, gets instructions because the other blockchain definitely did something, right? That's the point of the indexer. The indexer's like, hey, this definitely happened over here on the other chain.
Correct.
Now, this has to happen on chain number two, and it has to be, you know, It has to be massaged into exactly the right data structure and exactly the right, like, to work on chain number two. So it's kind of acting like a translator, if you will, where it's like, you heard one thing from one person and you're sharing the information to the other person on the other chain in a way they can understand it. So
Yeah.
so very much a translator sitting in here.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
replicating that message and translating it into the speak of chain number two. Now, when we talk about two Cardano chains connected, they would be formulating their transactions in the exact same way. So
Right. So yeah, if you just took a baseline Cardano, built your own Cardano sidechain with your own, magic number to start it
mhm,
up. For
right,
the geeks that know nodes, you can put your own magic number in and make your own totally separate Cardano. This tool would basically, one for one, here's a transaction that occurred over here. Go ahead and send the transaction over here, and make that transaction real over on the sidechain.
that's right. You would get savings in the fact that the translation from the index of the indexer to the mirrored transaction would be quite similar. And you also get savings because you could take the whole thing and spin it around, and chain number two pointing to chain number one would be very, very much the same mechanism. Whereas if you have two chains of differing consensus mechanisms, well, then you've got basically kind of you might even think of it as twice as many modules. You would end up splitting that perhaps into a few different implementations of a base module.
Right, that makes sense. So yeah, you need a mirror going the other direction to go back to the other chain.
That's
Just
correct.
like you have a mirror going this way, you would need both an indexer and a mirror on the other side. So
If
you'd
you
have a
would
whole
like
stack.
two-way transfers, yep.
You
If you're looking to go back to chain number one at any point, you're
Mhm.
going to need to take essentially that overviewed architecture and have the same mechanism going back.
Going the other direction. So a whole
Mhm.
stack going one way and a whole stack going the other way. All right.
Correct.
Very cool.
Mhm.
All right, this is fantastic. So we're moving through the architecture now. I think we've got a pretty good, handle on what that looks like. So let's talk about this Cardano relayer. What makes the relayer important in this architecture?
Well, the relayer is a central mechanism that allows us to validate. Um, it's sort of the glue between the indexer and the mirror, uh, but at the same time, it allows for loosely coupling the indexer and the mirror. It's sort of a central point that's going to do validation on those messages coming from the indexer. It's going to validate those against a repeatable structure that can be constructed from the script address, the UTXOs at the script address. So it's going to verify that. It's going to validate the signatures. So essentially, it's what the mirror is getting out of this deal is a message that it can trust coming from the relayer, centralizing, or I might even say isolating the relayer functionality into this module allows us, as I mentioned, to run multiple relayers that work together to provide this validation service to the
Mhm.
network. Um,
Good. I was going to ask you there because
mhm.
you use the word centralizing, and I mean, we know, like,
Isolate. Yeah.
but it's important. No, it's important. Like,
Yeah.
this is good because these are the trade-offs, and it's good to talk about these trade-offs, right? These are the trade-offs that you make when you build a sidechain. There are points along the way that could potentially be very centralized
Mhm.
depending on how you architect it.
Yeah.
But by when you said isolate it, what you mean is that there can be multiple relayers. There could be a consensus mechanism here, right? There can
Mhm.
be a consensus mechanism with multiple validators who could be taking turns validating transactions so that so that you again have you can choose to decentralize. You don't have to, right?
Right.
If you're building a structured enterprise side chain that needs to run and you need to have full control over what comes in and out of your side chain, well, that you can maintain full control of your relayer here. And you can determine what computers get to validate that relay. You could make them all yours and no one else has access to that. And then the people who would work on your enterprise sidechain would have to accept that if they're going to work on your sidechain. Or this could be a more decentralized, federated at a minimum type of arrangement where multiple validators are sitting in this relayer role and are spread out and able to validate in their turn. How'd I do with that? Did I do okay with that?
Yeah, I think that that's the idea, and of course that moving from centralization to decentralization is a journey, of course,
Of
and
course.
you know,
One of our favorite
we
sayings
start,
around here,
yeah,
decentralization is a journey.
we start with what we know, and you know, we make moves, and by you know, I'll use the right word this time, isolating portions of our system, a modular system that allows us to pick and choose portions that should be highly decentralized, and that if we have consensus mechanisms around uh, that interplay between something observed on one chain and something written to a second chain, if we can get good consensus around that, well, perhaps that's the only portion of it that needs to be run by you know, multiple public node operators, and similar to how any user can formulate and send a transaction into a node. Um, so long as that transaction is valid, it's going to go through. The same thing could be said for any old indexer sending in a message to a relayer. If it's a valid relayer, it will be passed on to any old mirror. So as long as the system can be trusted, that those messages to be validated from the indexer and to be formulated correctly for the mirror, as long as that mechanism can be trusted, well then, you know, you end up with a lot of savings as well, and you end up with decentralization as well. I mean, you know, the really, we would do decentralization in a heartbeat if it wasn't for security and scalability, right?
Of course,
So
right.
that's really what we're looking always to do, is to get you know, maximum security, maximum scalability as we ratchet up our decentralization.
Absolutely. There's the trilemma. We talk about the trilemma all the time, and that is the trilemma there. And so we make sure that we wanted to make sure that the community is understand as they're looking at our video here what each of these steps means along the way. And I think that did a really good job of sharing it, Paul. Are there any other sections of the documentation to show right now? It's just these are the three main components, right?
Yeah, these are the main components. This is what we'll use to build our product roadmap and spec out our features. So a lot more is going to be coming out of this for sure.
Fantastic. All right, Paul. Well, thank you again for all of the great knowledge dump today. This was fantastic. It was really great to explore this architecture with you, and I appreciate it. And we will see you guys next time.
Thanks.